Hi everyone. In this video, I'm very excited to report on this study that shows how strength training reduces self-administration of cocaine in rats. You guys know how obsessed I am with addiction literature. I've struggled so much with addiction, binge eating, and I've found the food freedom by understanding dopamine and the addiction literature and how to raise baseline levels of dopamine, because really the yo-yo dieting, the binge eating, the constant thinking about foods, what we can eat, what we're gonna eat, all of that really is just addiction is what it is. It's not having enough dopamine in our brains. And so one of the best ways to raise dopamine is by exercise. I've talked about how cardio raises dopamine. Now we're gonna look at how strength training seems to do the exact same thing. So I've reported in another video on how strength training reduced the self-administration of heroin in lab rats. Now we're going to look into another study, also done by the same author. His name is Dr. Mark Smith, very famous in the addiction literature, and he's just researching addiction for decades. So he's shown the same results. The study was from 2016, and the only difference is that they've used cocaine instead of heroin. So this study used female rats, and that's because female rats take longer to age, and so they did not want the growth rate to be very fast. And there's just one less variable that could affect the results, which is why they went with female rats. They divided them into two groups, the exercising group and the sedentary group. And it's really funny how they exercise the rats. They gave them a vertical ladder and they put a weighted vest on them. And that's a model that Dr. Mark Smith has used. He's created that and used that as a model for strength training. And so they trained the rats 6 days a week, and the routine involved 3 sets with different repetitions and resistance levels. Then the rats were given intravenous IV catheters that would allow them to self-administer cocaine. And they also measured BDNF expression in the nucleus accumbens. So here's where it gets sciencey. They measured BDNF. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. They looked at the levels of BDNF in the specific part of the brain that is all about addiction, and that's the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens is part of the basal ganglia. You've probably heard me talk about the basal ganglia multiple times. It is a critical part of the brain where all the dopamine activity happens, where all addictions happen, habit formation happens. So whenever we're talking about addiction, we're really looking at the basal ganglia and specifically the dopamine activity in the basal ganglia. And so the nucleus accumbens is part of the basal ganglia. Here's where it gets interesting. The exercising rats surprised everyone by self-administering significantly less cocaine compared to their sedentary counterparts. And the study also showed that the exercising rats reduced their cocaine consumption at higher unit prices, so they weren't willing to work too hard to get cocaine anymore. So they became more resistant to the drug's effects. And the exercising rats also showed lower BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, expression in the nucleus accumbens core compared to the sedentary rats. So for the BDNF part, it just shows how when you're exercising, you're less likely to like a drug too much. It doesn't really do much for you, which is why we see lower BDNF expression in that specific part of the brain, the nucleus accumbens core. When you raise your dopamine levels, your D2 receptor levels, when you train hard, there are so many changes that happen in the brain in addition to the changes in dopamine, and this is one of them. And it makes you less caring about the high that you get from drugs, because you don't feel that high, because you're already pretty high. So you don't feel that much of a change in your mental state. And so you don't remember that experience much. And so it doesn't get imprinted in your brain, which is step number 1 in addiction, forming strong memories of the experience of using a drug and how it made you feel. So there you have it. Strength training, just like we reported on cardio, also strength training now shows the same thing. It reduces self-administration of drugs, and one of the ways it does that is by making you less caring or making you not experience any high or much of a high from a drug experience, and so you really don't care for it. Kind of like for me, for example, if I smoke, I don't get any high, which is why I never really got addicted to smoking, and I am not a smoker. Whereas some other people might smoke and feel amazing and they get hooked on that feeling. And so whether you like the drug or not is step number one in addiction. And so when you exercise, you no longer like the drug as much, and it makes it a lot easier for you to not want it and to naturally reduce your self-administration of it. So you're not really fighting with cravings, and you're not having to deploy so much discipline to stop yourself from taking the drug. It just becomes so much easier. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the content of this video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Also, check out the group coaching. As usual, it's at the end of the video, the details, if you want to join us. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.